Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to C4C Apologetics. Glad you're tuning in. If you've seen the movie review that I did a little while back on the Ark in the Darkness, it drew a lot of attention, a lot of comments, a lot of feedback. And with that, we tried reaching out to a few of the different speakers from that film. And we got with us today Dr. Glenn Jackson. He's one of the speakers within this Ark in the Darkness film. He's the founder, creator, I'm assuming president of Points of Origins Ministry, if I'm not mistaken. He's got multiple degrees. He specializes really in biology and teaching and education. His professor, were you a professor at Liberty? Is that accurate?
I was an online professor of creation science. I was teaching history of life, which was CRST 290, history of life, which was their creation and evolution course.
Excellent. So Dr. J, I want to thank you for spending your time with us today. I know you're a very busy guy. Before we jump into any questions, would you like to share a little bit about yourself, any ministries or anything that you'd like for the people to know?
Well, being a retired high school and college teacher of science and education and social studies and in Christian schools, Bible class teacher and all of that, my main thrust has always been, helping young people. That's my grandfather said, I can tell you what that boy's life's going to be. He's going to be around kids his whole life. And that's what has been my joy. And it's a gift from God that I treasure very, very much.
Amen. Why did he believe you had a gift that you're going to spend your life around kids? What about you right then?
Well, he just saw, he was going for a while to a Lutheran church, and I was a Lutheran youth pastor, and he knew that I did a lot of youth work. And he was just, he would like to throw these off the cuff things and shoot from the hip quite often. He was a World War II veteran, 6'4", and that was kind of his style. But he was right. I still am. Now I'm about the age he was when he said that and about me.
We won't ask that question. But I do appreciate your time with us. Just right off the bat, how did you get into apologetics? Is that something that the Lord put on you, something that intrigued you? What happened?
Well, I knew the day I got saved, I kind of miraculously suddenly knew that the Bible was literally true, except in the places where it says it's not literal, when it says this represents this, the feet of clay, and Jesus said, now I'm going to tell you a story. It's a story about a farmer that had two sons. When you look at the context and everything there, but I realized it was really true the day I got saved. I was struggling to believe before that, but I had a gift from God the day I got saved. And I was like, wow. And I just started going through my mind of all the things. Jesus really walked on water. Mary was a virgin. That's biologically impossible. And then I thought, well, the Red Sea and Noah's in the ark. And then I thought Adam and Eve, that could not be true. And I was a science geek. From the time I was 5 till then, when I was 17. So, I believed everything they told me about, the Big Bang and about evolution and the millions and billions of years and everything. But I'm not suddenly in one day that was all ripped away from me, and I was freaking out. But so I made it my business. For a couple months, I was just like coasting on the joy of my new conversion to Christianity, my new born again with Jesus experience and the Bible lighting up. But I was at the Christian bookstore and I saw a little teeny book called the Creation Evolution Handbook. And I bought that thing and, tore through it with my eyes and my brain cover to cover. And it really got me going. I realized I needed to do something with this because I knew I was going to be a science teacher. And what was I going to do about it? And then I got Henry Morris and the other guy, real famous, slipped my mind, the book Scientific Creationism, which came out. And that I just also, it was not that long, but again, it just got threadbare from me reading it. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to mention something to you. It was Philip Johnson, a law professor at UCLA, who started the intelligent design movement with his concept of the wedge. He's the one that said that we should stop letting people call it creationism. Isms are always philosophies like communism or
Mm.
Nazism or fascism, and
Oh
they
yeah.
have a negative connotation. Why don't we call it Darwinism and
Mm.
evolutionism? Why do they just get to call it evolution? You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
so it was really him that started that. So I think it
Huh.
is. It's very important to go ahead and not say the ism, just call it creation or creation
Yeah.
science.
No, definitely. I appreciate that. And there's a lot of validity in that because I think the power of words to change somebody's viewpoints, like if we just call an unborn baby in the womb a fetus, we take all the humanness out of it. And so I don't want to get sidetracked with any of this, but I think words are very powerful. And like you said, that suffixism, bringing more of a philosophical concept or whatever, as opposed to like just call it creation. And so, no, I like that.
So, I mean, I needed to do that for myself and to prepare to be a science teacher, which I started in 1980. And then
Mhm.
I made a deal with God in 1981 that however deep my textbook went into the subject of evolution, whether it's dinosaurs or fossils
Mhm.
or Big Bang or whatever textbook I was teaching of, I would go to just that depth, presenting the creation model version of that. And it was a tightrope, but I never was fired over that, except
Mm.
by compromising Christians, never
Mm.
by unbelievers.
Wow.
They stuck to the thing where all things considered, and
Right.
all of that, and the political correctness. But and
Mm.
Jesus had the same problem with the philosophy of religious leaders in his time too. So,
Yes, he
but
did.
then I went and taught high school for a long time, and
Mhm.
then I was teaching college in the late 90s. Well, like 1996, I was teaching
Mhm.
college, and a girl at a Christian college came into my office, and she was one of my education students. She was going to be a science teacher, and she was in tears. She was in tears, and she said, "Dr. Jackson," and she's crying and everything. She says, "All of my friends at church think that I'm going to be serving Satan." Not because she was going to teach evolution, because she was going to teach science. She was serving Satan.
Oh.
And she said, and
Mm.
all my biology major friends think I'm weird because I believe Adam and Eve was real and evolution wasn't. I don't know what to do. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, sweetie, he said, I can help you with that. And that's when I realized I had something to offer from all of my years of
Experience.
experience and walking
Mhm.
that tightrope, and then being able to to really come at it with both fists at a Christian college for the sake of students who were being made to feel like intellectual inferiors,
Mhm.
not only by unbelievers, but by, I'm sorry, um,
Mhm.
people who are teaching false doctrine, saying that evolution was God's way. Even Richard Dawkins says
Mhm.
that it's insanity to try to make evolution and
Mhm.
Genesis work together. He's
Yeah.
right. And
Mhm.
a lot of compromise in Christians are wrong. And it is hurting the young people that God's given me a love for and that he loves more than I do. And they're not enduring sound doctrine. But that's a sign of the end of the age anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. And and I love the passion. I love the passion that's coming through you as well. With all this and apologetics, you have at least a Facebook ministry out there, and I think it used to be like a blog spot from Points of Origins. How did that start? What is that? Can you elaborate a little bit?
It was an email ministry to start with.
Oh
And
yeah,
I did it under the name of Sam Fox, which I thought of Samson and those little foxes he sent out into the,
the tails on fire.
yeah, and that was what I thought my emails were like. I prayed about that too. And points of origins, both are
Mhm.
plural. If and back in the day when I had the website,
Mhm.
if you didn't make them both plural, you went to a travel agency or a acupuncture website. So
Okay.
points of origins were the points about the origins of things,
Okay.
and it was email, and I had like hundreds of people on the email list. Maybe it was, yeah, I think it was 3,000 at one point. And
Oh
I would,
wow. Yeah.
every church and place I would go to, I would have them sign up to be on the email list, and
Mhm.
I mostly keyed that in manually, but that's what I was
Wow.
doing full time for 5 years. And then it went more on website and of course, I was doing a lot of speaking. For 5 years, I was independent as Point of Origins Ministries. And then for 5 years, I was working for Creation Truth Foundation in Noble, Oklahoma, and worked for 5 years in a small ministry, but it was bigger than me. So,
yeah, no, we're actually from Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, Newcastle area, Tulsa. Yeah, so
I've spoken in a lot of places around there, and lived there in the border between Norman and Oklahoma City. That big tornado got 6 miles from our house, and so
wow, yeah, I know it's devastating. It seems like more keeps getting hit. It's like a magnet or something.
Yeah.
But as far as the Ark in the Darkness film, how did you get involved in this film?
Well, I was in Ralph Stream's first movie, Genesis Paradise Lost, back in 2017, I guess it was, when that came out. And so, I mean, he tapped me like he tapped a lot of the people that were in GPL, Genesis Paradise Lost.
Okay. One thing I loved about the Ark in the Darkness, and I've studied the flood of Noah's Day for a while, obviously probably not as much nearly as what you and everybody else has in the film, but I've studied it a decent amount. But the one thing that was fascinating to me was in the film how you all showed various phases of the flood. When I study, I think of everything just happening, but I never really thought about breaking it down into phase 1, phase 2, this will happen, this will happen. I thought that was fascinating. Could you walk through a little bit about that? Like, what were the first things that happened with the flood, and just a quick overview?
That would be more like Steve Austin and some of those other guys that really are the experts on those things. But I mean, even the Bible says, it rained 40 days and 40 nights. And if you just look at Genesis 6 through 10, and then there's no rain, well, there might have been some rain, but the big rain stopped, the fountains of the great deep shut up, and then the windows of heaven shut. And then you've got 150 days where the waters prevailed upon the earth. They didn't start sinking down till that's another phase. And all of the earth movements, the tectonics that were going on at the time that would have had to been necessary for the flood. And according to John Bumgardner's Terra simulation, which got him on the front cover of Newsweek magazine back in the 90s, that simulation showed that if you put it in high gear for the catastrophic plate tectonics version of continental drift, that there would be a lot of tectonics, a lot of earthquakes and volcanoes and the mid-ocean ridge erupting all at once during the first phase of the flood. And then when that dies down, you've got an ocean that's basically been boiling on the front burner for 40 days. And once this all slowed down, then huge amounts of heat, huge amounts of evaporation, much more stuff is continuing to go on for a couple hundred years after that, which we think triggered the Ice Age, which would have lasted 300, 500, maybe 600 years after Noah's flood. There's all these different phases that happen, and it isn't until like day 370 or something that they actually get off the ark, where there's enough dry land that you could go someplace, or there was vegetation growing that the browsers could eat, and things like that. So, but and this whole shifting of these different tidal waves and everything that are on global scale. And one of the other questions you had sent me connects with this, and that is what I think would be one of the greatest evidences that there was a global flood. And that relates to what you just asked, and that is these layers of sandstone, sand, silt, mud, clay, gravel in these different stacks. I mean, that could happen in a local flood. It could happen at the end of a rainy season at the mouth of a river where the delta comes out. But that's the mouth of a river. Even the Great Mississippi River Delta it just goes out, it's around a couple hundred miles and goes into the Gulf of Mexico. But we're talking about layers that are continental in scale. The Austin Chalk, covers the whole United States, and where the continents split apart, you can find the Austin chalk going into Europe. The White Cliffs of Dover would be a part of that formation. The St. Peter sandstone, again, covers the entire United States at a different level in the layers. To have a pure layer of sand that's as big as a continent, a pure layer of chalk that's as big as a continent, it would have to have happened at all at once. And it would have to have been some event that was so big it could do a continent at once in one single event. And all those sand grains in the St. Peter sandstone, they all point from northeast to southwest. And we even find minerals from Canada down in the Sierra Nevada Basin Range province that came from there. We can identify those rocks from that place. And I'm not talking about rocks that came together. I'm talking about like sand grains and pebbles that got washed by a cataclysm. So these formations being on a continent scale, it's just there's no other way to explain it than by a continent scale and global scale hydraulic catastrophe, a water event.
So it couldn't have been just a localized flood in Mesopotamia. It had to have been a global flood over the earth.
Well, and evolutionists have been trying to feed us, and they were trying to feed us for decades, that these things were just river deltas, river delta deposits, which sounds pretty good until you realize, and then they started to say that the river mouth moved all around and around and around until it eventually, like Bob Ross painting a picture, it eventually daubed on every part of the continent. So this river mouth just moved everywhere till it dumped the same kind of sand on every part of the continent. That's a fairy tale. That's just, even when they said it, they must have known that the jig was going to be up someday, that somebody would stop just believing them because they had a PhD and were teaching at college and writing books and getting grants. Somebody was going to stop believing them, whoever got an inkling and part of an understanding or had the gall to question what was being fed to them, that was really stupid.
I mean, not even knowing a quarter of what it doesn't sound like it passes the logic test either, with all the movement, like you're saying, and tracking that all around. You did mention something, though, moments ago, as far as ages and whatnot. Now, I want to talk about something in the film that I never really thought of before. Now, I had my own ideas as far as why man lives so long before and why man lives a lot less longer than what they did. But I think it was called the exponential decay curve. Could you explain that? And from what I've understood from the film, The Ark in the Darkness, it's actually a really good argument as far as how we can know this is not myth or legend as far as the age of mankind then and now. So exponential decay curve, in layman's terms, what is that? And how does that prove that it's a historical thing, not a fairy tale?
Well, one of the criticisms of atheists is that the Bible was written by Bronze Age shepherds, and of course this goes with their worldview that we're getting smarter and smarter, and therefore that the person who says that is now the pinnacle of evolution and is really smart. But don't forget, these Bronze Age people invented geometry, architecture, astronomy, chemistry, the metallurgy. They did this stuff, Archimedes and Eratosthenes. I am serious. These people were smarter than us, and we're riding on their coattails. Isaac Newton said so. If it appears I've been able to see so far, it is because I have been standing on the shoulders of giants. He at least had the humility to admit that and to agree with that. So when they go on and on about all of these marvelous theories and how people back then were just so dumb, you've got to realize they were smarter. And now I'm forgetting the question you actually asked, but this is something that does make me mad: the pridefulness that we think oh yes, the J curve.
Yep.
The idea that Bronze Age shepherds could have actually given the ages of people that created an exponential decay that then settled out and reestablished a new equilibrium is ludicrous. Now, I think they were smarter than the evolutionists, the atheists are giving them credit, but I also don't think I was against their religion to actually lie or fabricate. And don't forget, there's 66 books in the Bible. And the Bible's written over a couple thousand years by like 40 different authors over all this different time, and it all connects. It's gotta be. It's a miracle book. But it's not just that. Why did people stop living so long? Methuselah, the oldest age given in the Bible, 969 years. We still talk about old as Methuselah. But Methuselah was old enough, he could have known Adam. Adam lived to be 930. And so their lifespans overlapped by about 200 years. And Lamech, who was Methuselah's son, who was Noah's father, Lamech's lifespan overlapped Adam by 50 years. They could have met. And, Lamech could have told his boy Noah about, me and Adam were buddies. He was really, really old, But now, a lot of people make fun of the Bible, saying, how could people live that long? But in Newsweek magazine, the cover story one year back in the 90s was, why do we die? It was big letters on the front. We understand what happens as we age and deteriorate and die, but nobody knows why it happens. All the scientists, the geriatric scientists, the gerontology studiers, and they know what they don't know why, because you have secondary backup systems and repair mechanisms that are constantly taking all the energy from the energy supplying foods that you eat, and all the materials from the nutrients and the minerals from everything you eat, and are constantly repairing you. Now, when you're a teenager, you're repairing faster than you're decaying. When you're my age, your body is repairing slower than the breakdown of the systems and the structures is happening, and eventually this catches up with us. So they were saying, why? Theoretically, they said in this article, and this was secular scientists, said the theoretical age, if we could do enzyme replacement, to replace the enzymes that we just stop making for no reason at all, we could live to be 1,000 years old. That's what they said. So secular scientists said, with the proper enzyme therapy, humans are designed to live 1,000 years. And that's after Noah's flood that it all started to go down. There's all kinds of interesting things about that, but the earth was different before the flood. The atmospheric pressure, the oxygen content, the humidity, the worldwide warm climate, the mild climate, and we find pine forests at the South Pole. The South Pole is not a floating ice cube like the North Pole is. The South Pole is a continent like North America, and we find fossils of pine forests with small dinosaurs stuck in the layers. They're fossils. But let's see now, where was I on that?
So now, we're talking about the ages and how secular science posits the fact that man can live 1,000 years old with enzyme replacement.
People don't talk about that very much. They think that, these 10,000 enzymes, if we could find the master regulatory genes that regulate the production of those enzymes, and maybe there'd be just like 5 or 50 of them, then we could achieve this. But even they put an age limit of 1,000 years. I think we had an inbreeding situation, which was not so bad at the, after people, 1,656 years after Adam. Inbreeding wasn't so bad. Adam and Eve's DNA would have been perfect with no mutations. Now each of us is carrying 300 to 600 lethal mutations that we are carriers of. That's why people have different ones that are lethal. That's why if you inbreed with a close relative, there's more of a chance that you and that close relative, out of your 22,000 genes, that you will have some of the same lethal genes, and it will be bad for the offspring if they indeed live at all, if they thrive at all. But back in the day, around Noah's time, it wouldn't have been as bad. Now, I'm not saying that inbreeding was what caused the ages to get less, but I do think that we didn't have as big a gene pool to choose from, as big a genetic variance. We had really Noah and his family, and then we had the three girls, the sons' wives, and that was all the DNA that was on the ark. And what went forward was, of course, the DNA of the three boys, which were from Noah's family, and the DNA of the three girls and the three breeding couples. Now, we may have lost genetically, in that genetic bottleneck, the longevity genes. Now, maybe the girls' families didn't have it and Noah's families did. It's a mystery. Nobody really knows. We do know the J curve that happened after that. Noah lived 350 more years after the flood. He was like 950 when he died, and his sons lived, to be 700, and then it was 500, 400, and then 200 and something, and then Abraham lived to be 175, and Joseph, I think, lived to be 140 or something, and Isaac, I think, was later. No, Isaac was 140, I think, and Joseph 110. And so and then later the Bible says, once this settled down, that for men it was 70 and 10, and for women it was 70 and 17, which is 70 and 76, or by reason of strength 80 years. So if anyone lived past 80, they were, beyond their life expectancy that the Bible said. But we think that St. John the Divine, the young man who was in Jesus's 12 disciples, lived to be in his 90s before he died of old age.
Yeah, definitely. And you brought up, I think you sort of alluded to it, and which is one reason why I've studied Institute for Creation Research, ICR, Henry Morris's ministry, and other stuff. How we can get such big animals and creatures, and the fact that like dinosaurs were huge and they had small nostrils, and the longevity of mankind before the flood. They were the first ones to introduce me to what was known as the vapor canopy theory. And it was interesting because when I looked at the temperature, I think it was between Mercury and Venus, that Venus is actually hotter than Mercury because it has a greenhouse effect around it. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense. And ICR was talking about the vapor canopy theory with the higher levels of oxygen and bigger growth, the longevity. What are your thoughts? Could you explain quickly the vapor canopy theory? And do you think this has any role as far as the prior to the flood events?
Well, quick, I want to do a little commercial in that you mentioned Henry Morrison. Then the name of the guy who co-wrote the Noah's Flood book that founded flood geology was John C. Whitcomb.
Oh,
and
yes.
I did get to meet Dr. Whitcomb. I met Dr. Morris as well. And it's John Whitmore at Cedarville University, who's just a wonderful creationist. I mean, he's like Indiana Jones. He's a great field geologist. He's also a very good teacher and lecturer, and he's a great research scientist at the same time. He's one of our bright spots, and I've enjoyed meeting him before too. Okay, so
I've got a couple of those older books. I was checking my bookshelf. This might be at the house, but I have another one or two from Henry and John.
Well, they're classics, and back in the day, we did formulate, because the waters above and the waters below and the expanse in between and the firmament, the rakia, which is the Hebrew word for the firmament. We came up with the vapor canopy or the water canopy theory, and one of the big proponents and developers of that was Dr. Larry Vardaman. And we went on and on with that. And as new data came in, we've had to change that. We haven't had to change the Bible because the Bible's always been right about it, but there's these gray areas of how did it happen and what was going on scientifically at the time that these things the Bible said happened what was happening. Well, the water canopy would have explained a lot about the weight of the atmospheric water, making air pressure twice as much. There were other reasons why we would have had more oxygen. Japanese researchers have found in ice bubbles in the Greenland ice caps, bubbles that contain 32% oxygen instead of 21 like today.
Yeah.
And so the greater oxygen and the greater pressure. So those dinosaurs that weigh, 70 tons, 140 feet nose to tail, they have nostrils the size of a horse and little, relatively peanut-sized lungs. But with that much oxygen, that much pressure, the pressure would drive the oxygen to dissolve quicker into the bloodstream. That's what causes you to get the bends when you scuba dive. You go down, the pressure causes the nitrogen in the air and in your to dissolve in your blood. When you come back up, the pressure's gone and it starts to fizz like a shook up Coca-Cola that just got opened, and then the fizz in your blood, that's dangerous and painful. It makes you bend over, so they called it the bends. But the greater pressure and the greater oxygen would have enabled these ginormous, creatures, the apatosaurs, the giganosaurs, the big ones they keep finding in Patagonia, and they keep having to give them names for bigger and bigger things. Those could have now, later after the flood, they could have lived till they got to a certain size, but were they able to live to reproductive age? If they couldn't, and it gradually would have happened, if they couldn't, then they would have gone extinct. And the big ones would have gone extinct first. Doesn't explain why the littler dinosaurs, velociraptors and Campythagnuses and things like that, and ankylosaurs, doesn't explain why they went extinct. But it's a mystery, and anybody who says they figured out how the dinosaurs went extinct, that's really ridiculous. There's like 30 theories that have been published, and then after Walter and Luis Alvarez found the iridium layer in Italy in 1981, and then found it in other places right at the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary, that started the asteroid impact theory, because iridium is a heavy metal like nickel that is a little bit rare on Earth, but it's very plentiful in meteors or in asteroids. So the asteroid impact theory gained popularity, and then around the year 2000, all the geologists in the world and astronomers, they got together and voted that dinosaurs went extinct because of an asteroid impact. Well, it just voted on it, And as I said before, truth has rarely been dependably determined by consensus. I mean, the Earth is not flat, the sun does not go around us, and so on and so on. And the phlogiston theory and many other theories just went out when more data came in. So it was actually creation researchers that eventually the mainstream researchers dropped the vapor canopy, because to have enough water to account for the flood, not coming from the oceans and not being vaporized to provide the water, the air pressure would have been so great. And under pressure, things heat up. And when you release pressure, things cool down. I don't know if you ever noticed it while you're using a spray can of like painting something. A spray can, if you keep holding down, it starts to get cold. That's an expanding gas. You're reducing the pressure. When you increase pressure, things heat up. So it would actually, if we had a water canopy with enough water to provide the water for Noah's flood, the pressure would have been so great that the Earth's surface would have been too hot for anything alive. Plants would die. Animals would never make it. So it was actually Dr. Larry Vardaman who did a lot of the wrap-up research and presented the data, and it was him who really made the creationist community turn away, by and large, from the water canopy theory as the main player in the flood. It's certainly, you could say that we have a water canopy today of sorts in the atmosphere, but it couldn't have been the main player. It couldn't have been the main provider of water.
Okay, and that just goes to show, like you were saying, that creationists, when science does legitimately point another way. Creationists have no problem saying, okay, let's look at something else, as long as it still aligns with the Bible, because we know the Bible is inerrant and the Bible is infallible. So we know that's 100% accurate. And so if we're trying to hold on to the vapor canopy theory, but everything is pointing that, this isn't necessarily plausible or reasonable, then okay, let's look at somewhere else. And so I do like that aspect that you drew out with that. Within the film, The Ark in the Darkness, there was this running motif throughout it. And it was about the fact, and I think it was an Olivet discourse with Jesus in Matthew chapter 23, where the motif was, as in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. Could you explain, what do you believe the similarities are when we see the second coming of Christ? What about the days of Noah will be similar to that day?
Well, you got to look at what Jesus said about the days of Noah. You got to look at what Peter says about the days of Noah. You got to look at what Genesis says about the days of Noah. That violence filled the earth, and it wasn't just humans; animals were being violent too, and that the imaginations of men were evil continually. And now look at us now. Now, Christians who are trying to be good guys and good gals, good men, good women, we're trying to stay away from those temptations. But the world's just opened a floodgate. Anything's cool now. There are very few things that are considered taboo, except people who say things are taboo. And so the imaginations of men is evil continually now. Selfishness, disobedient to parents, they will not endure sound doctrine. And I'm sorry to say, it's getting rarer and rarer to find ministries and churches and denominations and Christian colleges, universities, and schools that haven't run head to head and said, well, this the Bible says it, but we just don't think that's true. And I'm very sorry to see that, because I know enough science to know there's no reason to be afraid of any scientific discovery, any scientific fact. We don't have to put our heads in the sand. Let them do that. And let the compromising Christians, the compromising pastors, the teachers of false doctrine, and the science professors who are afraid of big guys with PhDs, and they don't have the self-confidence to stand up, and they are weak in their faith, and they are weak in their confidence in science, and perhaps weak in their knowledge. Let's let them put their head in the sand. And I told my students online, when I taught 17 years online for Liberty University, I said, never be afraid of any fact of science, any discovery, any artifact, any data that is observed, calculated from the observations, that is described. Because, we don't have to worry about it going against the Bible. Data never will.
No.
It never will.
Nope.
Oh, plenty of theories that use that data, use that evidence, will be against the Bible. Don't forget, evidence is not the same thing as proof. Okay? And so you can have the same, evolutionists and creationists both have the same evidence.
Yep.
And we come to different conclusions because we have a different paradigm or worldview lens through which we interpret all of the data. I mean, I've had evolutionists get mad at me and say, well, where's your evidence for this? I'm using the same evidence as you. I'm just interpreting it differently. That's all. So nothing in science will ever go against the Bible that is data, evidence, or even calculations of the data, observations. But theories and opinions, oh yes. Professional expert opinion, oh yes. And many times the scientific community has had egg on their face for sticking to these theories that they eventually had to dump that went against the Bible. And I think they're in a trauma right now because genetics has not worked with evolution. Immunology and bacterial resistance to our antibiotic drugs has not worked from the evolutionary frame point. That's a huge topic right there. So many things, they are dropping fossils and genetics now, going into epigenetics. The idea that the environment can change, they actually believe in phenotypic plasticity, that the environment can change the genetics, and then that gets cemented into the gene pool and passed on to the next generation by magic.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, there are genes that can be turned on and off by environmental conditions like temperature and other things. Stresses like low food supply, low oxygen, low resources and stuff. But those are genes that already exist that can be their activity can be modified. But what evolution and many compromising Christians will say is that God programmed the living things to be able to generate new genes when they're needed, and we actually don't see that.
No.
And it isn't what Gregor Mendel discovered. It isn't what John Sanford discovered in his modern research in genetics. Genes come from pre-existing genes, like life comes from pre-existing life. And you go all the way back to Louis Pasteur, which they named pasteurized milk after, back in 1864. He said that the theory of spontaneous generation will never recover from the blow of his simple experiment with the chicken soup broth and the bacteria. He said, nope, bacteria come from other bacteria and they don't just appear. But evolution, and I've said this before, every evolutionist, and hear me, every evolutionist believes in spontaneous generation of life. There's absolutely no way you have a planet, and I like how Ben Stein put it in the movie Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. He said, okay, so you have a planet with no life, and then all of a sudden there is life. How is that not spontaneous generation? You know, he nailed it because he is so brilliant. And of course, the evolutionists, Michael Roos and Richard Dawkins, there was nothing they could say. There's nothing I could say about that. That is spontaneous generation of life. Well, no, it happened over a long period of time. I don't care if it happened in 10 seconds or 10 million years. It's still spontaneous generation of life. And I like what Dr. Dwayne T. Gish, the father of us all, along with Henry Morris, said, that time cannot be the hero. These biological molecules, and he was a biochemist at Upjohn Laboratories. He said, the longer you wait, it doesn't give these chemicals a chance to finally come together. The longer you wait, the more probable that you will go to the most probable state, which is always the random state, not the other way around. It's always in the direction of entropy. And these, what if you get an ocean full of amino acids? They fall apart. They racemize after 40 years. Not 40 million years. By racemization, I mean all of the amino acids in your body are L amino acids, or left-hand rotatory. They rotate when you put them under plain polarized light. They rotate the light to the left. They're levorotatory, or L, and you see your vitamins, L-theanine, L-carnitine. All of the amino acids in your body are L's. But if just a blind chemical reaction makes carnitine, it'll make a 50-50 mix of L and D, or dextrorotatory, which rotates to the right. And that is poisonous. That it is toxic to all known forms of life. A few bacteria might be able to have some D amino acids in their protein strands, but and enzymes that it's been suggested, but basically they had a lot of troubles. And in No Intelligence Allowed and Expelled, Michael Roos was trying to explain how the crystal, the clay specks floating in the water could have collected preferentially the L amino acids and used them, but the best yield they ever got was 80%. That means that 1 out of 5 of the amino acids would have destroyed the effectiveness of any protein that tried. The scientific problems for them just got compounded and compounded so much. And I like what the late Dr. David Menton, another mentor of mine, said. He said to me, watch for the evolutionists to become more and more metaphysical and leave hard science behind, because they're going to have to. And that's what they've had to do with phenotypic plasticity. And they've gone beyond neo-Darwinism and the new generation of evolutionists are doing nothing but statistical analyses, mathematical constructs. It was Nikola Tesla said that scientists today, and this was about the turn of the other century, he said scientists today have substituted mathematics for experimentation. And they pile equation upon equation upon equation until they come up with something that bears no resemblance to the realities of the universe anymore.
Wow.
And that's what they've done. The evolutionists will present you with these complex looking charts. We've got a scientist like Dr. Jeanson, who is coming back, and there's some other younger creationists like him that are Nathaniel Jeanson, that are coming out with these computer generated color coded charts using data that show you the creationist interpretation, you know, garbage in, garbage out for evolutionists and creationists. How you program a computer simulation to go is the way it's going to go.
Right.
Chris Adami and his at Michigan State, I forget the name of the program, but they said that it proved evolution because it was a simulation. They programmed it to prove evolution. The Avita program, I think it was called, and they said it just proved evolution, but they programmed it to do that. Of course, it did what they told it to.
Yeah, it's one thing that's always gotten me, and like I said, the closer we get to the end and the return of Christ, the more we're going to see people just stray away, not only from faith, but from any sense of logic. It's like the number 6 that's written on the ground. You have two people standing on opposite sides. One says it's a 6, the other says it's a 9. And then you get the thing on the bottom that says, well, they're both right. It's just their perspective. No, somebody drew the number. Somebody knows that number and what it should be. So one's right and one's wrong. It's like I try to always ask people, before Mount Everest was discovered, what was the tallest mountain on the planet? And they'll say like K2 or whatever. Like, no, it was Mount Everest. It just hadn't been discovered yet. And so there's truth out there. It's just we have to find it. When we start from the Bible talks about the springs of the deep or the underwater thermal vents in the Galapagos Island, which were discovered in the 70s, from what I understand. And so, like you say, you just stand on the truth of the Bible. But the closer we get, the more people are gonna they're going to depart from the Bible, and they're going to hold on to secular humanism and transhumanism and the rise of AI. And like you said, what you put in is what you're going to get out. So this advent of AI is kind of dangerous.
I don't want to get into this, but I want to put a seed in your brain about this. You take quantum computers and how they work by entanglement and quantum theory and entanglement, and then program those with AI. Conventional computers work on a bit, a yes or no, ones and zeros.
Okay.
Like flipping a coin, heads or tails. But an analogy that I recently read that I like for quantum bits called qubits, with a Q, not a C like in the Bible. But a qubit is like you take the coin and spin it, and then you see it goes through all this infinite, like an integral in calculus, all these infinite different possibilities. Every bit in a quantum computer has a huge number of possibilities, not just two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
And then program a quantum computer with AI, with the newest AI. I think. And a lot of people are starting to wonder, and it would work for me if they used to have a really huge computer they were trying to build, and they were calling it the Beast, just for fun reasons. But what if they call this thing the Beast?
Yeah.
And it's AI, and it controls everybody else. I'm thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, Skynet achieves self-awareness, October 25th. I don't like conspiracy theories, and I'm not into it. I'm just saying, what? This could happen, but what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to save the world from conspiracies? No, we're supposed to be found in the vineyard as vineyard workers when the Lord returns. So what is it he's told you to do? What is he's told me to do? we better be about our Father's business like Jesus was when he was 12 in the temple and his parents were looking for him. We better be doing our job. And I can't do your job, Daniel. I don't have the same gifts as you. I'm not as young anymore as you. But I've been listening to the Lord, using what gifts he's given me and being a steward of it and praying to be better at this as the end of the age approaches, which it seems way more than, we don't have very many prophecies that need to, or predictions that need to be more fulfilled. They need to build the temple, and Daniel's desolation of abomination needs to be put up in the temple. And we do need the Antichrist, who's maybe here somewhere, and we do need the beast and the false prophet and all these things that are in place. But don't forget, in the lifetime of some people still walking around this planet, there had been no country, a nation of Israel, for 2,000 years. And then in May of 1948, suddenly there was a country, Israel. And then now Israel's role in prophecy, and look at it now, the prophecy that all the nations of the world are going to gang up on them. Well, there aren't very many countries that are willing to be patient as Israel defends its borders and its land. They're being called bullies and everything like that. And our country is waffling on our backing of Israel, which evangelical Christians and the Judeo-Christian community is watching that great and with carefully. And I guess this all rolls into your question about how is this similar to the days of Noah? We see these prophecies coming, and Ralph Streen really wanted to make a movie that took all of the events and the warnings of Noah's flood and the warnings the New Testament made about the world that's going to be destroyed by fire next time, and showing people it's later than you think.
Yeah, I think, in the beginning of the film, and I don't want to, spoiler alert, but.
Lots of people have seen it.
Yeah. And so the imagery of what people were doing prior to the flood, I mean, we think of Molech after the flood. We think of, these idols and statues. But it was very interesting to see, stuff like that prior. And so when we're talking about the flood, someone that, you've been in this film, you've been in Genesis, Paradise Lost, and very much researched it. What are probably like the top 2 or 3 greatest evidences for a global flood?
Well, like I said, those continent-size, water-deposited sedimentary layers. There's also the massive volcanic layers too. Now we're talking about things way bigger than the Hawaiian archipelago. We're talking about things, the super volcano that's under Yosemite National Park. These places that made lava plains that were half the size of a continent in Russia and in the United States, and all these tectonic events. The things that would have been necessary to form the landforms we have today. Not just the sedimentary layers, the geostratigraphical layers, but the bending of them, the mountain bending, and they showed that in the movie of the layers, and you can see it in road cuts where you see these layers like a layer cake, but sometimes the layers will do weird stuff like this.
That was fascinating. Yeah.
How can that happen? So I think, to me, as a science guy, it would be the continental scale landforms that would have had to have been caused, since they are contiguous. They would have had to have been caused by solitary or independent events. And the entire flood itself, those border lines between the layers, if you follow them far enough, the discontinuity, or the layer in between the layers, the little break, if you follow them far enough, they grade into each other. They aren't really separate. So there is no worldwide discontinuity or unconformity in the layers. They eventually grade into each other if they are big enough to go far enough. So I think it's the flood was a geological event on a great scale. Of course, many biological things happened. There are a lot of other interesting things, like the immense amount of coal. I think I was one of the people that talked about that in the movie. But one thing we didn't talk about was oil wells. You know, we don't have very many gusher wells anymore.
Okay.
But used to be that it'd be like they were just puncturing a water balloon and out it would come under its own pressure. And that huge amount of pressure, if those layers have been down there since like the Jurassic or something like that, the pressure would have eventually been let off. Even through solid rock, the pressure would have, the fluid pressure and gas pressures would have seeped through the rock over 100 million years. There shouldn't be gusher wells today. And there certainly shouldn't be big domes of natural gas floating above the oil in these porous layers. It's not like a giant cavern under there with a bunch of waves and the oil. It's within porous rock like shales and sandstones. But there shouldn't be that kind of pressure. Surely it would have, found cracks and fissures, or even gone in between the grains, because a lot of these things are found they're all found in sedimentary layers. Why would the pressure have lasted that long? That's another one. And the massive amounts of coal, why would that be there? Where did it come from, and how did we have that much vegetation for that? And how did we have enough vegetation and animal life for these big pools of rotting organic material to make the petroleum, the crude oil that we find? Those are other ones, but that's all. When you're talking about biology and astronomy and things like that, the flood was essentially a hydrogeologic event. So geology is where you'd find the big stuff, but there's all these little biology things. There's even all of these astronomical things, planetary geologists, talking about the flood on Mars,
right?
And the greater bombardment and the lesser bombardment of asteroids, which we see recorded on the moon craters and the Mars craters and the Mercury craters. Venus's surface has been redone by continental drift, just like our planet. So craters wouldn't be able to last that long. It would be recycled. The crust gets recycled. But there's a lot of evidence that the greater bombardment and lesser bombardment weren't that far apart. And if you could look it up, ghost craters on the moon. Danny Faulkner did a lot of analysis of ghost craters on the moon, which Carl Sagan himself pointed out in the book Cosmos, that the crater Flamstein was an example, that it was a mystery to them, but not if the moon is only 6,000 years old. Then those ghost craters would make perfect sense. It's a longer topic, and Dr. Danny Faulkner is the expert on that.
Yes, I love what you drew out, because those are evidences that at least someone like me and maybe others haven't heard, as far as some of the better evidences for a global flood. So I appreciate that. I know in the film, when they showed sedimentary layers and the bending rock, and they talked about, well, it has to have been pliable for it to bend without cracking. And I was like, wow, that's just fascinating.
It couldn't have lithified yet or turned to stone yet.
Yeah, it would have broke or cracked, right?
Now, when you mention all these other little tidbits I'm throwing in, I want you to know, before the movie came out, I read the book, The Ark in the Darkness.
Oh, yeah.
That has new stuff I hadn't. It had a lot of old stuff. It had some recent stuff that I knew, like the ankylosaur fossil. Well, it was related to ankylosaurs that was mummified, but it also had some newer stuff, newer data, and newer interpretations, even by evolutionists, that were going, wow, what are we going to do with this? So that the book that goes with the movie, The Ark in the Darkness, has a lot of these tidbits and new ones that I learned that I hadn't seen or occurred to me yet. So I'm plugging the book, but if you liked the movie, the book gives a lot more detail there, and it's coming out from Genesis Apologetics. Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. We'll put that link in the descriptions below as far as anybody get the book and the Ghost Craters as well. But let's see. What would you say to those critics of the Bible and the critics of the flood that, I mean, there's pretty solid evidence that corroborates the events of Genesis 6 and 7. What would you say as far as those people that still try to raise objections? Any thoughts as far as that's concerned? Any encouragements for them?
Encouragements for the
Or,
unbelievers?
or just an aspect of, just like another motif in the film was, willfully ignorant. And so there's very clear evidences, but I think it all stems back to a worldview perspective, if you will. But how to try to help get them from unbelief to belief. Now, I understand that we don't save people, we tell people. The business of saving is between God and the individual. But what words would you say to those that are skeptics, critics? Encouragement is probably a bad word choice there, but you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to ask?
Well, there was a book by Thomas Kuhn written in the early 60s called Revolutions in Scientific Thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all about the concept bringing forth big time, which is now all scientists talk about it, but it was bringing to the front burner the concept of paradigms, which are
Mm-hmm.
the theoretical lenses through which we view things. For instance, the paradigm in geology used to be the shrinking apple head lady model of the Earth, where as the Earth cooled, it shrunk and made wrinkles. Then those were the mountains. The geosynclinal theory to explain mountains. But then the book really went into how in the 1700s and the 1800s, there were people suggesting continental drift, and Wegener in 1912, I think it was, got the credit for that. But now the reigning paradigm in geology and geography is plate tectonics or continental drift.
Okay.
Everything is interpreted through that paradigm. The reigning paradigm in astronomy and cosmology, cosmogony, is the Big Bang Theory. Whether it's right or wrong, the Big Bang Theory is the lens through which the secular scientists look. And evolution has been by popular vote, not by logic or science.
Right.
It's been by vote and opinion, the reigning paradigm in biology. The quote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution," is a totally closed-minded and wedded to the paradigm, wedded to their theory quote. And that was Theodosius Dobzhansky who said that. And that quote was at the beginning of my college evolution textbook back in the 19 I guess it was the 70s or 80s when I read that book. I forget, but that just shows the closed-mindedness. Richard Dawkins was quoted in the New York Times as saying, "If you meet someone who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is either ignorant, stupid, or insane." And I was like, and he said, or evil, but I'd rather not. He put that in parentheses. I'd rather discuss that. That's very close-minded for a scientist. In other words, anyone who disagrees with me has got to be ignorant, stupid, or insane. So I'll show people that quote from the New York Times, and I'll say, well, ignorant, I've got 4 college degrees, and they're all from secular schools. Stupid, I'm a lifetime member of Mensa with an IQ in the 98th percentile. And then, but as for the insane part, I don't have any paperwork for that. And I have actually been told by a Christian college university professor that he figures I'm mentally ill. I was insane because my faith and my science knowledge clashed, and I was traumatized. And this was the head of the philosophy department who he made Darwin's Origin of the Species required reading in his classes. And he was an ordained minister too, and said that I was out of my mind. So that's okay. They said that about Jeremiah. They said it to Paul, "Thou art mad with much study." I'm in good company. But just look at the truth. What does the Bible actually say? Do you like it or not? in Job, it says he will judge whether it be whether something like whether it be in thy mind or not. He's going to do the truth, like you said about Mount Everest. The truth is the truth. See, and the 6 is a 6. Look for the footprints of the person who wrote it, and you'll know which way it was written. Are there no footprints? Then it's either one of two things. But no, now they'll go all around it, and they'll say, how does it feel to be this piece of dirt, moved around in the sand? Nowadays, they are really serious that you make your own reality. Reality, the same people that say stupid stuff, I'm sorry, that is unintelligent, and they're fooling themselves, and they're trying to fool other people. They're trying to lie to people and get them to believe it because it sounds so wise. But the same people that get up there and say reality is what you make it, they will not step out in front of moving train. Because now reality is true to them.
Right.
Well, why not step out in front of the moving train? I mean, it's not really there, right? I'm making my reality. I'm another train. Choo, choo, choo. I'll just run into it. No, you can't pretend without consequences. You can't ignore the laws of the universe. They're there. They're ordained, and they're so finely tuned. So this ridiculousness in theology and in science and the study of both, there are hypocrites on both sides who are messing with the basic tenets of theology, the basic tenets of the holy scriptures, and the basic tenets of what science is. I'll get there. Linus Pauling, 2-time Nobel Prize winner, said, "Science is the search for the truth, the effort to understand the world." And I think Linus Pauling would, because he did it a lot in his lifetime, he would chew out certain select scientists, and he'd do it in public. He did it back then. I think if he was alive today, he'd do it now for being so ridiculous on these flights of fancy. Tesla would continue criticizing them for being on these flights of fancy. And I think we need to. I did have that quote I wanted to show you from the question about worldview.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about that. Why do people find it difficult for them to change a worldview that they've adopted? I think that's what you were going to bring up.
And actually, it'd probably be easier for you to read this quote. This is from one of my PowerPoint presentations. So if you could just...
It says, we are often highly conservative and will hold to a viewpoint longer than is justified when there is no alternative, or worse, when the logical alternative upsets the rest of our worldview.
And this was about those embryos that are supposed to prove evolution. It was in an article in American Scientist in 1988. Haeckel drew those pictures of the embryos to support evolution in 1866. And at the University of Jena, he was found guilty of scientific fraud in 1874. But those pictures were rediscovered around 1900 and put in textbooks, and they persisted for 100 years. And even Stephen Jay Gould, the famous evolutionist, in an article called Abscheulich, which means atrocious in German, he said, why have these things persisted for so long? The Haeckelian view. Why did it persist? Well, because textbooks are written by copying older science textbooks. And once it gets canonized, it's hard to get it out. But this is another reason that these two people in American Scientist magazine also quoted, if it goes against your worldview, or you have no other thing you can cling to, no new theory to replace the old one, you hesitate to destroy it. And also if it messes with your worldview, your current worldview. Now there's another reason too, Daniel. A little secret in academia and in the scientific community, there are people whose entire life's work hinges on evolution being true. Book publishing, tenure, reputation, science research grants. And the only thing that many of them have to live for is their reputation, the prestige they get, the pridefulness they have of having for 30 or 50 years been a leader in the thinking of evolutionary theory.
Yeah.
And then what if it's not true? What would that do to their self-esteem, their ego, their sense of my life mattered if the whole theory was nothing but a fairy tale to begin with? They're fighting for their very lives, for the very thing. If they don't believe in a higher power of any kind, they only believe in the power of the human spirit, and their human spirit would be crushed to think that they were barking up the wrong tree the whole time. So there's a great motivation to not accept the idea that their paradigm was ever in question. So they dig their heels in and just keep going and try to add secondary assumption upon secondary assumption until, as Tesla said, it no longer bears any resemblance to reality.
Yeah, and those rescuing devices just keep getting added on and on and on. But so on the YouTube channel that you have, that you're putting up there, some older videos from, I think it was your Facebook stuff from a few years back. There's one that
years ago, yeah.
Yeah, there's one that really intrigued me because I love the aspect of just consciousness and abstract thought. And really was Dr. Frank Turek that really got me thinking about this aspect. Was when you're looking at creation evolution, you're looking at, did matter create the mind or consciousness, or did mind create matter? And there's no way that the material can create the immaterial, but an immaterial can create material. And it was fascinating. But you did a video where you talked about man's consciousness and how it's a problem for evolution. Could you elaborate? What's your thoughts as far as how do the evolutionists get around this aspect of how can evolution account for things like love or things like mathematics, the laws of logic, non-contradiction, excluded middle? Could you elaborate?
Well, they could probably go with the laws of mathematics and physical laws, but the idea that we actually have a mind or are conscious, that we have a consciousness, if you're a materialist, you really have to think that consciousness is an illusion generated by brain chemicals affecting the firing of your synapses in this organism that you are. I was speaking at Carnegie Mellon University once to the Atheist Club.
Okay.
And it was such a heavy meeting that we ran out of time, and the whole meeting moved to another room that because some bicycle club was coming in. The whole Atheist Club and me moved to another room so they could continue pummeling the creationist.
Okay.
But during the second room thing, they were trying to say that there can be intelligence without a mind. And I actually asked the young man who was arguing with me, I said, so do you have a mind? And he just kept going on about electrons and magnetic fields moving around. And I asked him 3 times before he finally said, no, because that was his worldview. No. And one of the atheist guys went, did he just say he doesn't have a mind? Yeah, I think so. And so I'm like, okay. And of course, then the answer, which Ken Ham likes to put it, okay, if you don't have a mind, then how do you know you're right about this?
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis said, if a bucket of milk spilled over and splashed a certain pattern by total random, how is that different from the particles that came together to make your brain? How can I trust all those particles to actually come up with an understanding? But back in the 70s, evolutionists were saying this a lot. It was metaphysical. They said, evolution is the only natural process that has come to be conscious of itself and to understand itself through us studying it, writing about it, and proclaiming it. Now, that's a religion.
Yeah.
That's not cut and dried, hard, cold facts, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. It's not black and white. That is sprinkling this with spiritism.
Yeah.
And Stephen Jay Gould, in his left wall theory, criticized other evolutionists for saying anthropomorphizing evolution. In other words, making it like it was a conscious thing that had a teleology, that had an end goal in mind, that was trying to make monkeys and trying to turn them into people, which, if evolution by Gould's perspective, was a non-directed thing, but that it kept bouncing off a left wall, like a drunk walking down the street. It bounces off this wall, and it seems to be getting further from the wall, which gives the illusion that the drunk is on purpose turning right to go someplace. But really, extinction and natural selection are happening. And he said it gives the illusion of a teleology, an illusion that it has meaning, that it's deliberately trying to do something. And that was his left wall theorem, which he used to disprove the idea that that evolution or nature knew what it was doing. But the idea that we are not conscious, now then it really begs the question, then how do you know you're right? If your mind is just a bunch of chemicals firing, what good is your life? Ken Ham brings this up when he's talking to audiences, and it often isn't mentioned very much. But to admit that you don't have a mind and your consciousness does not matter, that is just like walking out in front of the train. Here's where their unreality has to rubber meets the road, where they have to admit, I'm wrong, because I like the idea that I'm conscious. I like the idea that I love my children. I like the idea that I love my wife and my family, that I have anger and frustration. And those are real things. And with goals in my life, I have dreams, and I enjoy this life I'm living. I like a good steak. I mean, how can you say those things if steak isn't really real? I mean, we're all in the Matrix, right? Having a steak with an agent. I mean, what's the point? There isn't any point. I attended a lecture at University of Oklahoma there in Norman by Richard Dawkins. And the title of the lecture was The Purpose of Purpose. And of course, in the end, his conclusion was that there is no purpose.
It was Bertrand Russell has said that the universe is exactly as we would expect it, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. And so, no, definitely, I appreciate that. Well, as we're wrapping this up and picked your, brain as far as a lot of the stuff with the flood and consciousness and just a lot of various things. And it's been a fascinating interview, very well schooled, very knowledgeable on this stuff. But as we wrap this up, are there any final thoughts or words you'd like to share with those that are watching before we say goodbye?
The thing that's most on my heart is the way that there are people, enlightened, or we might say woke people in the church, who say, if you believe in these antiquated interpretations of the Bible, you're a biblical literalist. I actually had a college chaplain say to me, well, my faith has grown more sophisticated than that. And in my mind, I didn't say it. I was like, now listen, dude, my IQ makes yours look like a shoe size, and you're telling me your faith is more mature and sophisticated than mine. When someone's trying to make you feel stupid, misery loves company. You have a thinking mind that God gave you. Maybe you don't know the reason why some contradiction they're trying to point out to you in the Bible. Maybe like that college campus question the atheists were giving students for a long time was, if God is all powerful, can he make a rock
so heavy
big that even he cannot lift it? Okay.
Omnipotence paradox.
That sounds like it's a paradox, but it's not. Just like, should we throw stones at her? Should we pay tribute to Caesar? There's a snake in the question. The question is flawed. Jesus knew where the flaw was in the question. The question about, even Richard Dawkins said, if there was a God, he would have to be so big that even merely conceptualizing him would be sheer insanity. I agree with Richard Dawkins on that. If there was a God. If there is a God, asking questions about how much power he has to make a rock, asking how big, there's another quantity. he could make a rock and he's infinite. How strong is he to lift that rock? You are applying quantifying finiteness to something that is by definition infinite. And that's irrational. The same thing, if God made everything, who made God? That assumes something. It assumes that God had to be made. And because we see everything in finiteness, it's very difficult for us to see what the flaw in that question is. I always say there's three things the human brain can't number crunch, just like your dog doesn't know why you have to go to work to earn money to buy the gravy train for him. He doesn't know, but he trusts you and is happy when you come back home from work. But okay, we cannot conceptualize the empty set, nothingness. That's why we're constantly looking for the end of small with the CERN particle collider. We cannot conceptualize infinite, which is why the James Webb Space Telescope is out there trying to find the end of big. And we also cannot conceptualize time. Someone asked Albert Einstein, what is time? He said, time is what clocks measure. He got out of it. Richard Feynman said, time is just God's way of making sure everything doesn't happen at once. We can't number crunch time or the infinity or the empty set. So because we can't manage the concept of infinity, we just make a sideways 8 and feel better about it. These questions, who made God? Can God make a rock that big? Those take advantage and exploit the fact that we can't conceptualize infinity. So what I'm trying to say is, when they give you some smart alecky question that makes it seem like your faith in the Bible being literally true is irrational, chances are their question is flawed. Like the Pharisees' questions were flawed. They didn't understand the difference between the authority of man and the authority of God with that Caesar and the penny thing. They didn't understand the difference between God's law and God's grace with the woman caught in adultery. And they thought they would pin Jesus because he was thinking in the big box, the God box. They were thinking in their little box of rules and trying to get Jesus to go in the box and play by their rules. Don't you go into the Pharisee box with these pretenders of intellectualism. Don't believe them when they say, I'm smarter than you. You know what? There's such a thing as I like what Philip Johnson said, PhD without Jesus is just a post hole digger. Or I think it was Howard Hill that said, it's piled higher and deeper. These people who go and get these degrees aren't any smarter than you. I feel like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz talking to the scarecrow. Why, I come from where I come from. There are places of great learning, and they have no more brains than you have. But they've got one thing you haven't got, and that's a diploma. And so he confers upon him the doctor of thinkology. The Pythagorean theorem. Oh, joy, I've got a brain. Well, oh, joy, brothers and sisters, you have a brain. You just didn't realize it. And don't let people say you're stupid. Don't let people say you're stupid. If someone's trying to make you feel like you're stupid, they're trying to control you because they'll feel better if they can. Stay out of their control. Stay in the big box. Realize if they bring something that seems to show that our faith is in vain, there's probably a snake in the question. And let the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth that Jesus used, let him show you what was wrong with the question and speak as an oracle of God. Jesus said in Luke, he said, when they call you before the magistrates and the rulers and the synagogues, think not what you ought to say. The Holy Ghost will teach you in that hour what you ought to say. And that is my verse for doing debates, for speaking to almost all hostile audiences, is that verse. It's not by might, it's not by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. And he that handleth a matter wisely shall find good. Let the wisdom of God be in you. And don't be afraid that these people are smart enough that they're ever going to prove your faith is wrong, because they can't. There's no way, because your faith is not wrong. Reality still stands, and the Bible is true, and it can stand every test. Let them try to punch holes in the Bible. It's like, my dad can beat up your dad, can whoop your dad. When God flexes his abs, I don't care who you are. You try to punch him there, it's like a brick wall. That Bible can take criticism. That's why they get so mad when you even question their theories, because they're getting scared. You're getting close to their Achilles heel. Okay, that would be the last thing I'd want to say. Take heart, brothers and sisters, because our faith is not in vain. Build one another up in your most holy faith. The Bible is actually true, and there's nothing that's ever happened or been discovered that's gone against it. Just certain people's theories that have done so.
Yep. Amen and amen. And time again, archaeological excavations continuously prove and corroborate the scriptures recorded.
Don't get me going on that, but you're right. Yes.
So, no, I appreciate everything, Dr. J. And for those tuning in, check out Points of Origin, the Facebook. There's like a few thousand followers on there. The YouTube channel, help bump that up for them. And I appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, God bless.
God bless you, Daniel. Thanks for having me.